Close your eyes now. Let the weight of your body sink deeply into the surface beneath you. Feel the gravity of the earth pulling you down, gently, steadily, as if you are being cradled by the soil itself. You are safe. You are still. The air around you is cool and soft, like a thin veil of silk brushing against your skin. Take a slow, deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs with a quiet stillness, and as you exhale, let go of the day. Let the sounds of the modern world dissolve into a distant, faded memory. The hum of machines, the flicker of lights, the rush of time, all of it is drifting away, replaced by the soft, rhythmic pulse of an older world. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing at the edge of a great, emerald sea. But this is not a sea of water. It is a sea of leaves, a vast, breathing ocean of green that stretches out toward every horizon, whispering in a language of wind and rain. This is the jungle of the Yucatan, the heart of the Maya world, a place where time does not move in straight lines, but in great, slow circles, like the turning of a heavy stone wheel. The air here is thick with the scent of damp earth, crushed jasmine, and the ancient breath of the trees. It is a heavy air, a comforting air, one that wraps around you like a warm blanket. As you stand here, the sun is beginning its long, slow descent. The sky is turning a deep, bruised purple, streaked with veins of gold and copper. The heat of the afternoon is fading, giving way to the cool, blue shadows of the evening. You can hear the jungle beginning to wake up in its own, nocturnal way. There is the distant, haunting call of a howler monkey, a sound that echoes through the canopy like a long-lost prayer. There is the rhythmic chirping of cicadas, a steady, hypnotic vibration that seems to pulse in time with your own heartbeat. Everything is moving slowly. Everything is at peace. You begin to walk, your feet sinking softly into the carpet of moss and fallen leaves. The path is narrow and winding, guided by the silver light of a rising moon. As you walk, the trees seem to lean in toward you, their massive roots twisting like sleeping giants beneath the earth. These trees have stood here for 1,000 years. They have seen the rise of kings and the fall of empires. They are the silent witnesses to a story that is etched into the very stones of this land. A story of a people who reached for the stars, who spoke to the gods, and who, eventually, walked away into the shadows of history. In the distance, rising above the canopy like a mountain made of moonlight, you see the silhouette of a great pyramid. Its steps are steep and narrow, climbing upward toward the heavens. This is a place of power. This is a place of memory. This is the world of the ancient Maya. For centuries, this landscape was alive with the sound of human voices, the clatter of stone tools, the vibrant colors of marketplace trade, and the smoke of sacred incense. Millions of people once called this emerald wilderness their home. They built cities that rivaled the greatest of the ancient world. They mapped the stars with a precision that still baffles the modern mind, and then, in a silence that still echoes today, they left. We are here to explore that silence. Not with urgency, not with the frantic energy of a treasure hunter, but with the quiet patience of a dreamer. We are here to listen to the stones. We are here to feel the rhythm of the seasons. We are here to understand why a civilization so grand, so sophisticated, and so deeply connected to the earth chose to abandon its magnificent homes. Was it the rain that stopped falling? Was it the ground that grew tired of giving? Was it the fire of war, or the slow erosion of faith? Or was it something else, something as natural and inevitable as the setting of the sun? As we move deeper into this story, let your mind wander through the corridors of time. See the plazas filled with people dressed in white cotton and bright feathers. See the scribes painting delicate glyphs onto bark paper, recording the movements of Venus and the lineage of their lords. Hear the soft patter of rain on a thatched roof. Feel the coolness of a limestone cavern, where the water is as still as glass. This is not a tragedy we are witnessing. It is a transformation. It is the story of how life adapts, how it breathes, and how it eventually finds a new way to exist within the embrace of the wild. The jungle is a master of patience. It does not hurry to reclaim what was taken. It moves leaf by leaf, vine by vine, root by root. It covers the carvings of kings with soft, green moss. It fills the courtyards with the saplings of mahogany and cedar. It turns the great temples into hills of stone and earth, hiding them away like secrets kept for a future age. As you drift further into sleep, you are becoming part of that patience. You are letting the moss grow over your worries. You are letting the vines of sleep wrap gently around your thoughts. Think of the Maya not as a ghost story, but as a living memory. They believed that time was a burden carried on the backs of the gods. Every day was a weight, a responsibility to be honored with ritual and respect. They lived in a world where the spiritual and the physical were woven together like the fibers of a basket. The corn they ate was not just food. It was the flesh of their ancestors. The rain was not just weather. It was the blood of the sky. In this introduction to our long journey, we are simply setting the stage, preparing the ground for the seeds of the story to grow. The shadows are deepening now. The moon is high, casting long, pale beams through the branches, illuminating the swirling mist that clings to the forest floor. You find a place to rest, a soft mound of earth at the base of a great ceiba tree, the world tree of the Maya, whose roots reach down into the underworld and whose branches hold up the sky. You lean back against its rough, comforting bark. You are here. You are present. You are drifting. The mystery of the Maya collapse is a quiet one. It did not happen in a single night of fire and screaming. It was a slow fading, like the embers of a campfire dying down into white ash. It was a choice made by thousands of families to seek a different life, to move toward the coast, to find new water, to leave behind the heavy stones of the past. As we listen to their story, we find a reflection of our own relationship with the world. We find the beauty of human ambition and the humility of human limits. Listen to the sound of my voice. It is a low, steady hum, like the wind moving through the high canopy. It is a sound that requires nothing from you. You do not need to remember the dates. You do not need to memorize the names of the kings or the locations of the cities. You only need to feel the atmosphere. You only need to let the images float through your mind like clouds passing over a dark lake. The limestone, the jade, the obsidian, the cornel of these elements are becoming parts of your dream as we prepare to enter the first chapter of this long history. Feel the stillness of the jungle floor. The insects have found their rhythm. The night birds are calling softly to one another. The world is turning, slowly, inevitably, toward the dawn, but for now, it is night. It is a deep, ancient night, and you are safe within it. The Maya world is waiting for you, hidden beneath the leaves, whispering its secrets to those who are quiet enough to hear. Breathe in the scent of the damp earth one more time. Let your limbs feel heavy and warm. Let your heart beat in time with the slow, rhythmic pulse of the rainforest. We are going back. We are going deep. We are drifting into the heart of the jungle, where the stones still speak and the trees still remember. Sleep is coming now, a gentle tide, washing away the edges of the world, leaving only the soft, golden light of the story. The air is cool, and the mist is thick. As you step further into this ancient world, the modern age feels like a dream from which you have finally awakened. The silence of the jungle is not an empty silence. It is a full, heavy presence, a vibration of life that hums just beneath the threshold of hearing. You are walking through the lowlands now, a vast limestone shelf that forms the heart of the Maya territory. Beneath your feet, the ground is porous and ancient, a honeycomb of hidden rivers and secret caverns. This is the foundation upon which one of the world's most mysterious civilizations was built. The Maya did not live in a single, unified empire. There was no central capital, no single king who ruled over every leaf and stone. Instead, the landscape was a tapestry of city-states, each a jewel in the crown of the forest. Tikal, Kopam, Palenque, Calakmul. These names are like incantations, rising from the earth with a weight and a history that commands respect. Imagine these cities not as ruins, but as vibrant, pulsing centers of light and color. In the height of their glory, the gray stone we see today was covered in smooth plaster, painted in brilliant shades of cinnabar red, ochre yellow, and sky blue dot. As you drift through the outskirts of a great city, the first thing you notice is the sound of life. Not the mechanical roar of our time, but the rhythmic sound of 1,000 human hands. The steady thump-thump-thump of women grinding maize on stone matadi. The rhythmic clack-clack of looms as cotton is woven into fine garments. The distant ringing strike of obsidian against flint. These are the sounds of a world in harmony with its environment. The Maya were masters of the forest, not its conquerors. They understood the delicate balance of the soil, the movements of the water, and the needs of the trees. The forest around you is a garden. It is not a wild, untamed tangle, but a carefully managed landscape. Between the towering mahoganies and the wide-leaved cebas, you see groves of cacao trees, their pods hanging like heavy, colorful jewels from their trunks. You see patches of maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters of Mesoamerican agriculture, growing together in a symbiotic embrace. The Maya lived in a world where the distinction between nature and culture did not exist. Every plant had a spirit. Every stone had a memory. To harvest a crop was to participate in a sacred dialogue with the earth. As you move closer to the city center, the structures begin to rise. These are not merely buildings. They are cosmic mountains. The pyramids were designed to mimic the sacred peaks where the gods lived. Their steep staircases were pathways to the heavens, and the dark chambers at their summits were portals to the underworld. You walk past a great bulkcourt, its stone rings carved with the images of entwined serpents. Here, the movement of a rubber ball represented the movement of the sun and the moon, a game where the stakes were nothing less than the equilibrium of the universe. The people you pass move with a slow, deliberate grace. Their skin is darkened by the sun, their hair black and lustrous, adorned with shells and jade. A nobleman passes by, carried on a litter of polished wood. His headdress is a fountain of quetzal feathers, shimmering in iridescent greens and golds. To the Maya, the quetzal was a sacred bird, its long tail feathers representing the breath of life and the abundance of the forest. The nobleman's jewelry is made of jade not for its monetary value, but because its green color symbolized water, corn, and eternal life. The deeper we go into this world, the more we realize that the Maya were a people obsessed with time. For them, time was not an abstract concept, it was a physical weight. Each day was a deity that had to be carried. They tracked the movements of the planets with a precision that seems impossible for a culture without telescopes. They knew the cycles of Venus, the timing of eclipses, and the long, slow wobble of the Earth's axis. They saw history not as a line leading toward a destination, but as a great circle. What had happened before would happen again. The past was a map of the future. This sense of circularity provided a profound comfort, but also a profound responsibility. If the gods had provided rain in the past, they would provide it again, but only if the proper rituals were observed, only if the blood was given, and only if the balance was maintained. You can see this dedication in every carving, every glyph, and every temple. The city is a giant clock, a limestone machine, built to track the heartbeat of the cosmos. As you rest your hand against the cool surface of a stela, tall stone monument, you feel the carvings beneath your fingers. These are the tree stones, the records of history. They tell of births and deaths, of battles won and alliances forged. They speak of kings who called themselves Kayula Jah, or holy lords, beings who stood at the threshold between the human and the divine. These kings were responsible for bringing the rain and ensuring the fertility of the earth. When the rains fell and the corn grew tall, the king was a god. But what happens, you wonder, when the rain stops? What happens when the gods turn their faces away? But we are not there yet. In this part of our journey, the civilization is at its peak. The markets are overflowing with goods from across the Maya world. Salt from the northern coasts, obsidian from the volcanic highlands, brightly colored shells from the Caribbean, and fine pottery painted with scenes of palace life. The air is filled with the scent of copal incense, a sweet, resinous smoke that carries the prayers of the people upward, toward the clouds. It is a world of abundance, of intellectual brilliance, and of deep spiritual conviction. The Maya world was also a world of water. In a land with no great rivers in the central lowlands, the people became masters of hydraulic engineering. They carved massive reservoirs out of the limestone, lining them with plaster to hold the precious rains of the summer. They built canals and raised fields in the wetlands, turning swamps into breadbaskets. You can hear the soft trickle of water moving through stone channels, a sound that meant the difference between life and death. The water was sacred, a gift from the rain god Chalk, whose lightning axe split the clouds to release the life-giving flow. As the evening settles over the city, the fires are lit. Small plumes of smoke rise from the thatched roofs of the commoners' houses, which cluster around the great plazas. Inside, families gather around the hearth, the three stones that represent the center of the universe. They tell stories of the hero twins who descended into the underworld to defeat the lords of death through wit and skill. They speak of the maize god, who was reborn from the shell of a turtle. These stories are the fabric of their lives, providing a sense of meaning and place in a world that was often harsh and unpredictable. You find yourself sitting on the steps of a small temple, watching the stars emerge. The Maya astronomers are already at work, perched on the platforms of their observatories, watching the star that is not a star, Venus's. It rises in the west. They are recording its position, calculating its return, ensuring that the calendar remains true. There is a profound sense of order here, a sense that as long as the rituals are performed and the stars are watched, the world will continue to turn. But even in this moment of peace, there are shadows. The jungle is always waiting at the edge of the clearing. The soil is thin, and the population is growing. The demands on the land are increasing. The kings are building taller temples, requiring more lime, which requires more wood to fire the kilns, which leads to fewer trees. The balance is delicate. The circle is turning. As you listen to the sounds of the Maya night, let your mind drift over the vastness of this civilization. Thousands of cities, millions of people, a language of beauty and complexity, a science of the stars, and a soul tied to the earth. This is the world we will be exploring, a world of light and shadow, of stone and spirit. For now, let the image of the painted pyramids under the moonlight be your guide. Let the rhythmic grinding of the maize and the scent of the copal smoke lull you into a deeper state of rest. You are a guest in this ancient land, a silent observer of a time that has passed, but whose echoes still resonate in the rustle of the leaves. The jungle is breathing. The city is sleeping. The stars are moving in their appointed paths. You are safe, you are still, and you are beginning to understand the magnitude of the story we are about to tell. The Maya are not gone. They are simply waiting for us to remember them. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of damp limestone and the faint, sweet musk of decaying leaves. As you drift deeper into this story, imagine yourself standing in the center of a vast, white plaza. The ground beneath your feet is perfectly smooth, covered in a layer of polished lime plaster that reflects the pale light of the morning sun. Around you, the great kingdoms of the Maya rise from the forest floor like mountains of carved stone, their summits touching the clouds. This is the era of the great builders, a time when the lowlands were transformed into a landscape of architectural wonder. To understand the collapse, we must first understand the height of the achievement. The Maya did not simply build cities. They created sacred geometry. Every pyramid, every temple, and every courtyard was placed with a divine intention. aligned with the rising of the sun on the solstice, or the path of the Milky Way across the night sky. As you look up at the towering temples of Tikal, or the elegant, sloping roofs of Palenque, you are looking at a civilization that saw no boundary between the earth and the heavens. The construction of these cities was a labor of generations, a slow and rhythmic process that echoed the cycles of the jungle itself. Imagine the sound of 1,000 stone, chisels, flint, and obsidian striking against the soft, buttery limestone of the region. The Maya had no metal tools, no pulleys, and no pack animals. Every block of stone, some weighing several tons, was quarried by hand, hauled on wooden rollers, and lifted into place by the sheer strength of human muscle and collective will. There is a profound stillness in that thought, this steady, patient effort of thousands of people working in unison to create something that would outlast their own lives. As you walk across the plaza, notice the texture of the buildings. They are not the cold, gray ruins we see today. In their prime, they were alive with color. The Maya covered their stone structures in a thick skin of stucco, which was then painted in vibrant, deep reds made from cinnabar and iron oxide. The cities would have glowed in the tropical sun, standing out against the deep emerald green of the surrounding forest. The red color was not merely decorative. It was the color of life, the color of the rising sun, and the color of the blood that fed the gods. The architecture was a language. The carvings on the facades of the buildings, the monster mouths of the doorways, the weeping faces of the rain gods, the intricate scrolls of the sky serpents told the story of the universe. To enter a temple was to walk into the mouth of a mountain, to descend into the womb of the earth, or to ascend into the realm of the divine. The buildings were living entities. They were fed with offerings of incense and blood, and they were killed or deactivated when their time had passed, often being built over by new, even grander structures. Look toward the great plaza of a city like Copan. Here, the architecture becomes even more intimate. You see the famous hieroglyphic stairway, a massive flight of steps, where every single riser is carved with intricate glyphs. It is the longest stone text in the Americas, a literal staircase of history. As you imagine a priest ascending these stairs, you can almost hear the soft rustle of his cotton robes and the clicking of his jade pectorals. Each step he takes is a movement through time, a recitation of the deeds of his ancestors. But these cities were more than just ceremonial centers. They were complex, living urban environments. Surrounding the great stone core of the temples were the sprawling residential districts. The Maya did not live in high-density blocks. They lived in garden cities. Each family compound was nestled within a grove of fruit, trees of acato, papaya, and ramon nut. Small kitchen gardens, or milpas, were tucked between the houses, creating a patchwork of green that blurred the line between the city and the wild. The engineering required to sustain these populations was nothing short of miraculous. In the southern lowlands, where the soil was thin and the dry season was long and punishing, the Maya became masters of the landscape. They carved the hillsides into terraces to prevent erosion and trap moisture. They built massive reservoirs, lined with clay and stone, that could hold millions of gallons of water. You can almost hear the sound of water rushing through stone-lined canals, diverted from the seasonal rains to fill the city's heart. This water was the lifeblood of the kingdom, and the king's ability to provide it was the foundation of his power. As the sun climbs higher in your mind's eye, see the marketplaces that bustled at the feet of the pyramids. Here, the economy of the Maya world moved in a slow, steady flow. There was no coinage. Instead, wealth was measured in the things of the earth. Cacao beans, the brown gold, were used as currency, along with woven cotton mantles, jade beads, and bright quetzal feathers. Imagine the sense of the market, the sweet aroma of roasted corn, the pungent smell of dried fish brought from the coast, and the earthy fragrance of freshly dug tubers. It was a world of trade and connection, linking the mountain peaks of the highlands to the low, flat plains of the north. The construction of these cities also tells us about the social order. The sky lords, the kings, were the architects of this grandeur. Their names were as poetic as the stars: shield, jaguar, bird, jaguar, smoke monkey, 18 rabbit. They were the bridge between the people and the divine. When a king built a new temple, he was not just building a monument to himself. He was ensuring the continued existence of the world. He was pinning the earth to the sky with a needle of stone. As you wander through the residential areas, the scale of the city begins to reveal itself. A city like Tikal may have housed 60,000 people or more at its height. The logistics of feeding, watering, and housing such a population in the middle of a tropical rainforest required a level of organization and knowledge that we are only beginning to fully appreciate. The Maya understood the forest's limits, or at least, they did for a long time. They knew how to rotate crops, how to manage the forest canopy to keep the ground cool, and how to use every part of the environment without destroying it. But even as we admire the beauty of the stone and sky, we must listen to the subtle sounds of the forest's edge. The construction of these great kingdoms required an immense amount of wood. To create the lime plaster that covered the cities, thousands of trees had to be felled and burned in massive kilns. For every major building project, a forest was sacrificed. The red paint, the smooth floors, the towering roof combs, all of it had a price. The landscape was being slowly transformed, the canopy thinning, the soil beginning to feel the heat of the sun more directly. Yet, in this part of our story, the cities are still rising, the kingdoms are at peace, or at least in a state of balanced competition. The ball games are being played, the astronomers are recording the long cycles of time, and the kings are celebrating their Keaton endings, the 20-year markers that measured the heartbeat of the era. There is a sense of permanence here, a feeling that these stone mountains would stand forever, unmoving against the green tide of the jungle. As you drift closer to sleep, let the image of the city at twilight fill your mind. The red temples are turning a deep purple. The smoke from the cooking fires is beginning to drift over the plazas. The sound of the stonemason's tools has quieted for the day, replaced by the soft evening breeze rattling the palm fronds. The Maya world is a masterpiece of human ingenuity and spiritual devotion. A world of stone and sky that seems, for this moment, to be eternal. Feel the stability of the stone. Feel the vastness of the plazas. You are resting in the heart of a great kingdom, protected by the shadows of the temples and the ancient wisdom of the builders. The world is in balance. The stars are in their places, and you are falling deeper and deeper into the quiet, rhythmic peace of the ancient past. The night in the jungle is never truly dark. It is a world of silver and shadow, lit by the steady glow of the Milky Way, what the Maya called the Wakachan, the world tree. As you lie in the stillness, imagine the starlight filtering through the high canopy, casting long, ethereal patterns on the stone floors of the royal palaces. In this part of our journey, we step into the inner sanctum of the Maya soul. We look into the eyes of the Kayawalaja, the holy lords, and listen to the rhythmic chanting of priests as they navigate the thin veil between the living and the dead. To the Maya, the world was not a collection of random events. It was a grand, divine performance, and the king was the lead actor. He was the axis mundi, the central pole that held the sky from collapsing onto the earth. When you envision a Maya king, do not think of a distant, secular ruler. Think of a shaman priest, a being who possessed the terrifying and beautiful ability to transform. Through ritual, he could become the jaguar god of the underworld, or the youthful maize god, bringing life back to the parched soil. As you drift through the corridors of the palace, the air grows thick with the scent of copal and the metallic temps of blood. For the Maya, blood was the most precious substance in the universe. It was Shula, the divine essence, the very liquid of life. They believed that the gods had sacrificed their own blood to create humanity from yellow and white corn. In return, The people and, especially the kings and queens, were required to give back. This was the sacred covenant. The king would pierce his tongue or his skin with obsidian blades or stingray spines, allowing his life force to fall onto strips of bark paper. These papers were then burned, the smoke rising to carry the king's prayers into the nostrils of the gods. This was not an act of cruelty in their eyes, but an act of profound love and responsibility. It was a heavy burden to be the bridge. If the king did not bleed, the sun might not rise. If the king did not dance, the rains might not fall. You can almost see him now, in the flickering light of a torch, his body adorned with the green scales of jade and the shimmering feathers of the quetzal, moving in a slow, hypnotic dance. The bells on his ankles chime with every step, a sound that represents the rattling of the cosmic serpent. The priests who surrounded the king were the keepers of the secret knowledge. They were the masters of the long count, the calendar that stretched back billions of years into the past and forward into the infinite future. They watched the sky with a patience that transcends modern understanding. They knew that the movements of the stars were the thoughts of the gods made visible. To them, an eclipse was not a shadow. It was a moment of cosmic peril, a struggle that required intense prayer and ritual to resolve. In the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the soft, rhythmic scratching of their styluses as they paint the codices, the screenfold books of bark paper. These books contained the history of the cosmos, the medicinal properties of every jungle plant, and the complex tables of the lunar cycles. Every glyph they painted was a living thing, a bird's head, a hand holding a bowl, a flower. These were not just letters, but symbols vibrating with spiritual power. To read was to speak with the ancestors. To write was to weave the future. The gods of the Maya were not like the human-like gods of Greece or Rome. They were fluid, shifting entities, often combining animal, human, and plant features. There was Itzamna, the ancient lord of the sky, often depicted as a wizened old man or a great celestial bird. There was Chak, the rain god, with his reptilian features and his lightning axe, who lived in the depths of the sun. And there was the maize god, the most beautiful of them all, whose life, death, and resurrection mirrored the annual cycle of the crops. The Maya believed in a complex, multi-layered universe. Above the earth were 13 levels of heaven, and below were the 9 levels of Xibalba, the place of fear. Xibalba was not a place of punishment, but a watery, subterranean realm where the lords of death held sway. It was a place that every soul, even the kings, had to navigate after death. As you rest, imagine the cool, dark waters of a cave, the entrance to this underworld. The Maya saw these caves as the birthplace of the clouds and the home of the ancestors. They were portals, places where the air was always still and the water was as dark as obsidian. The power of the kings and priests was rooted in their perceived success in managing these divine forces. For centuries, the system worked in a beautiful, slow harmony. The people provided the labor and the food, and the kings provided the spiritual security. It was a social contract written in stone and sealed with ritual. But this power was also fragile. It relied on the weather, the soil, and the predictable cycles of the stars. The king's divinity was tied to the prosperity of the land. As you listen to the distant sounds of the jungle, consider the pressure that must have weighed upon these holy lords. Every drought, every failed harvest, every unpredicted event was a crack in the foundation of their authority. If the gods stopped listening to the king, why should the people? If the ritual blood no longer brought the rain, what was the purpose of the pyramid? But for now, in the golden age of the Maya, the faith is absolute. The temples are full of the scent of offerings, maize tamales, chocolate frothed with honey and chili, and the sweet smoke of tobacco. The people find comfort in the elaborate ceremonies that mark the passing of the seasons. They see their own lives reflected in the great stories of the gods. They are part of a cosmic tapestry, woven by the hands of the divine. The sun is beginning to set in our story once more. The king has finished his dance, The priests have retired to their chambers to watch the rising of the evening star. The city is quiet, held in the protective embrace of the gods. As you sink deeper into your own rest, let the images of jade and feathers, of smoke and stone, drift through your mind. Feel the weight of the ancient beliefs, the profound sense of connection to something much larger than oneself. The world of the Maya was a world of profound meaning, where every leaf and every star had a name and a story. You are safe in the knowledge of that order. You are part of the long, slow cycle of time. The gods are watching, the ancestors are whispering, and the jungle is cradling the secrets of the kings in its green, velvet arms. Sleep now, drifting on the current of an ancient faith, moving toward the center of the world. The silence of the night deepens, and as it does, the stars above seem to pulse with a deliberate, rhythmic light. In this quiet space, we enter the most intricate chamber of the Maya mind, the realm of time. To the ancient Maya, time was not an empty vessel or a ticking clock. It was a living, breathing entity. It was a physical weight, a series of divine burdens carried on the backs of the gods. As you settle into the stillness of your rest, imagine time as a vast, celestial parade, moving with the slow, inevitable grace of the planets. The Maya were the greatest timekeepers the world has ever known. They lived in a universe where the past, present, and future were not separate rooms, but a single, continuous loop. To understand their world, you must imagine yourself standing at the center of several interlocking gears, great stone wheels that turn at different speeds, their teeth clicking into place with mathematical precision. The first wheel is the Tzolk'in, the sacred almanac of 260 days. This was the calendar of the soul, a cycle that tracked the human gestation period and the growth of the maize. It consisted of 20 named days: Imix, the crocodile, Ik, the wind, Akbal, the night, interwoven with the numbers 1 through 13. Each day had its own personality, its own omen, and its own spirit. When a child was born, the priests would consult the Tzolk'in to see what burden that child would carry through life. It was a map of the human spirit, a guide for the rituals that kept the individual in harmony with the cosmos. The second wheel is the Hab, the solar calendar of 365 days. This was the calendar of the earth, the cycle of the seasons, the rain, and the harvests. It was divided into 18 months of 20 days each, with a final 5-day period at the end, called the Wayub. These 5 days were considered nameless and dangerous. They were a time when the veil between worlds grew thin, when the gods rested, and when the people stayed inside, extinguished their fires, and waited in silent prayer for the world to begin anew. Imagine the moment when these two wheels, the sacred and the solar, aligned. This happened once every 52 years, a monumental event called the calendar round. For the Maya, this was a time of cosmic renewal. It was a moment to reflect on the half-century that had passed, and to petition the gods for the 52 years to come. It was as if the universe took a great, deep breath, resetting the rhythm of life. But the Maya looked even further. They looked into the long count, a linear calendar that tracked time from a mythical starting point, a day in our year 3114 BCE, when the current world was born. They measured time in vast units: the Kayan a day, the Winal 20 days, the Ton 360 days, the Kayaton about 20 years, and the Borkton about 394 years. They spoke of cycles that lasted millions, even billions of years. They were a people who found comfort in the infinite. They saw themselves as a small but vital part of a story that had no beginning and no end. As you drift, think about the burden of time. The Maya depicted the units of time as gods. A god would carry the weight of a day on his back, using a tumpline across his forehead. At the end of the day, he would set the burden down, and the god of the next day would pick it up. If the god was benevolent, the day would be peaceful. If the god was vengeful, the day would be full of strife. This meant that history was not just a record of what happened. It was a record of who was carrying the world. The kings were the masters of these cycles. Every 20 years, at the end of a Kayaton, the king would perform a period-ending ritual. He would scatter incense, draw blood, and dedicate a new stela stone monument to bind the time. These stelae were like stakes driven into the earth to hold the fabric of reality together. They were the anchors of the kingdom. On these stones, the scribes carved the long count dates, ensuring that the deeds of the king would be remembered as long as the stone endured. There is a deep, hypnotic peace in this vision of the world. Imagine the comfort of knowing that your life is part of a perfectly ordered system. The stars move, the seasons turn, and the gods carry their burdens in a predictable dance. The Maya? Astronomers watched the great fire, the sun and the great star, Venus, with such devotion that they could predict their positions centuries into the future. They built their observatories, like the Caracol at Chichen Itza, with windows aligned to the extreme points of Venus's journey across the horizon. In the quiet of the night, you can almost feel the turning of these great wheels, the clicking of the gears, the slow, steady movement of the planets, the soft rustle of the priest's bark paper books. Time was not a predator to the Maya. It was a companion. It was a language they used to communicate with the divine. But the calendar was also a mirror. It told the Maya that just as the sun sets, it must rise. And just as a civilization rises, it must eventually turn back toward the earth. They knew that there were cycles of creation and cycles of destruction. They believed that 3 worlds had existed before this one, each ending in a transformation. This gave them a profound sense of humility. They knew they were living in a temporary window of light, and that their task was to keep that window open for as long as possible through ritual and sacrifice. As you sink deeper into sleep, let the numbers and the names of the days wash over you like a gentle rain. Imix, Ik, Akbal, Cain. The cycles are turning. The gods are shifting their burdens. The stars are in their correct houses. You are resting in a universe that is perfectly measured, perfectly timed, and perfectly balanced. The weight of the day you have just finished is being set down. The god of the night is picking up the burden of your dreams. There is no need to hurry. There is no need to count the hours. You are part of the long count now, drifting in the vast, silver sea of Maya time. The jungle remembers the dates. The stones remember the kings. And you, in the stillness of your rest, are remembering the rhythm of the world. The air in the jungle has grown thin, and the humidity, once a wet embrace, now feels like a heavy, dry weight upon the skin as you drift deeper into the heart of the Maya story. The vibrant green of our previous chapters begins to fade, just slightly, at the edges. We are entering a time of silence. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of a land that is waiting for a rain that does not come. Imagine yourself standing on the high platform of a temple, looking out over the vast canopy. Usually, the horizon is a misty, breathing ocean of life. But now, the mist is gone. The sky is a hard, polished turquoise, brilliant and unforgiving. The sun, once a source of life-giving warmth, has become a steady, searing eye that does not blink. For generations, the Maya lived in a delicate dance with the seasons. They knew that the rains were a gift, a liquid mercy bestowed by the god Chak. They had built their world around the rhythm of the monsoon. But in this era, the rhythm begins to falter. It starts slowly, so slowly that a single lifetime might not even notice the shift. A rainy season that starts a few weeks late. A dry season that lingers a few weeks too long. The elders might whisper that the rains are not what they used to be, but the work of the city continues. The stonecutters still strike their chisels. The weavers still pass their shuttles. Yet, beneath the surface of daily life, the earth is beginning to tire. The Maya lowlands are a strange and beautiful contradiction. It is a land of lush growth, Yet it is a land without great rivers. The water does not sit on the surface. It vanishes. The limestone floor of the peninsula is like a giant sponge, riddled with holes and secret veins. When the rain falls, it sinks instantly into the dark, cool belly of the underworld. To survive, the Maya had to become the most sophisticated water managers of the ancient world. They carved massive reservoirs out of the bedrock, lining them with layers of sand and gravel to filter the water, and sealing them with thick red plaster to keep the precious liquid from escaping back into the stone. Imagine the sound of the city during these years of mounting stress. In the great plazas of Tikal and Karakol, the sound of water was the sound of survival. During the good years, the reservoirs were full, their surfaces reflecting the red temples and the white clouds. But as the droughts begin to lengthen, the water levels drop. You can hear the hollow echo of a ceramic jar hitting the bottom of a stone cistern. You can see the dark ring of dampness receding down the walls of the reservoir, leaving behind a crust of dry, white mineral. The water grows warm and stagnant. The water lilies, which the Maya cultivated as symbols of purity and life, begin to wilt and turn brown. The drought is not a single event, but a slow erosion of the soul. The Maya believed that their kings were the rainmakers. The Kewalajaw was the one who could speak to the clouds and command the lightning. When the rains fail, the pressure on the king becomes an unbearable weight. Imagine the king standing on the summit of his pyramid, his body painted in sacred blue, his hands trembling as he prepares to offer more of his own blood. He pierces himself again and again, the obsidian blade cold against his skin, calling out to the four corners of the world. He calls to the east, the place of the red dawn. He calls to the north, the white land of the ancestors. He calls to the west, the black horizon of the setting sun. And he calls to the south, the yellow path of the wind. But the sky remains empty. The clouds that do appear are thin and wispy, like the ghosts of birds, drifting away before they can shed a single drop. The forest, too, begins to change its song. The lush, broad leaves of the mahogany trees begin to curl and drop to the forest floor, creating a dry, brittle carpet that crunches underfoot. The birds, those vibrant messengers of the gods, grow quiet in the heat of the day. The howler monkeys move more slowly through the canopy, their voices raspy and thin. The animals are thirsty. The earth is thirsty. And the people, the millions of people who rely on the stalks of maize for their very existence, begin to look at the sky with a growing, quiet dread. To understand the environmental stress of this time, we must look at the soil. The Maya were masterful farmers, but they were working with a thin, fragile layer of earth. They practiced slash-and-burn agriculture, clearing patches of forest and using the nutrient-rich ash to fertilize their corn. For a long time, this was a sustainable cycle. The forest had time to regrow, and the soil had time to rest. But as the cities grew larger, as the pyramids rose higher, and as the population swelled into the millions, the cycle was forced to speed up. The trees were cleared faster than they could grow back. The soil was planted year after year, without rest, until its strength was spent. The forest was not just a source of food, it was a source of fuel. To build the magnificent, plastered cities we admired in our earlier chapters, the Maya needed a staggering amount of wood. Every square inch of the great temples was covered in smooth, white lime plaster. To create that plaster, limestone had to be heated in massive kilns to temperatures that only a raging wood fire could provide. It is estimated that for every large building project, thousands of acres of ancient forest were consumed. As the trees disappeared, the local climate began to shift. Without the shade of the canopy, the ground grew hotter. Without the breath of the trees, the moisture they release into the air, the local rains began to vanish. It was a slow, self-inflicted wound, a tragedy written in the loss of the green shade in the villages. The daily life of the farmer becomes a struggle against the dust. The corn, the sacred substance from which the Maya believed they were made, is a thirsty plant. It needs the predictable rains of the summer to swell the kernels. But now, the stalks are stunted and yellow. The beans and squash, which once climbed the corn in a lush, green embrace, are withered and dry. The farmer kneels in the dust of his field, his hands calloused and weary, searching for any sign of moisture in the earth. He remembers the stories his grandfather told of a time when the rains were so heavy they turned the plazas into lakes. To him, that time feels like a myth, a dream from a world that no longer exists. The Maya sought refuge in the underworld. They turned to the cenotes, the natural limestone sinkholes that provided the only permanent access to the water table. These places were sacred, the mouths of the gods. In times of drought, the pilgrimages to the cenotes became more frequent and more desperate. Imagine the procession of people moving through the parched forest, carrying offerings of jade, pottery, and incense. They descend the steep, rocky paths into the cool, damp darkness of the cave. The air here is different. It smells of stone and ancient water. They look into the dark, still pool at the bottom, a mirror reflecting the flickering light of their torches. They pray to the lords of the underworld, begging for the lifeblood of the earth to rise. But the drought is not just local. Modern science, looking through the lens of history, has found evidence of a massive, regional shift in the climate during this time. The movement of the tropical rain belts shifted, pushing the moisture away from the Maya heartland for decades at a time. This was a change on a scale that no king could influence, no ritual could correct, and no sacrifice could appease. It was the slow, rhythmic breathing of the planet, turning away from the people of the lowlands. As the generations pass, the stress becomes a permanent feature of life. Overpopulation means that there is no more new land to clear. The hillsides, once covered in forest, are now bare and eroded. The topsoil washing away into the valleys during the few violent storms that do break the dry spells. The hunger is not a sharp, sudden pain, but a dull, constant ache. It is the sound of a child crying in the night. It is the sight of a mother dividing a small handful of parched corn among her family. The social fabric, once so tightly woven by faith and prosperity, begins to fray at the edges. The silence of nature is the most terrifying thing of all. When the cicadas stop their rhythmic humming because it is too hot to move. When the frogs stop their chorus because the ponds have turned to cracked mud. When the wind blows only dust and the scent of dry grass. In this silence, the people begin to wonder. They look at the great, red pyramids, the stone mountains built to honor the gods, and they see them differently. They are no longer just symbols of divine protection. They are reminders of a contract that seems to have been broken. You are drifting now. The dry heat of the story beginning to fade as the cool of the night takes over. The pressure of the drought is a heavy thing to contemplate. But here, in the safety of your rest, it is only a memory. You can feel the weight of those centuries, the slow, inevitable building of the stress. It was not a single day of fire, but 1,000 days of thirst. It was the slow turning of the world, the environment reaching its limit, and the people trying, with all their skill and devotion, to hold on to a way of life that the earth could no longer support. The jungle is patient. It knows how to wait for the rain. It knows that even in the driest of times, a seed can sleep for 100 years, waiting for a single drop of water to wake it up. As you sleep, think of that patience. Let the dry, hard light of the drought dissolve into the soft, velvet darkness of the night. The stories of the stones are not just stories of glory, but stories of endurance. The Maya did not give up easily. The night is vast, and the air is still, carrying only the faint, rhythmic sound of a distant drum. As you settle deeper into the warmth of your rest, imagine the landscape not as a single forest, but as a chessboard of light and shadow. The cities we have visited, The magnificent kingdoms of stone and sky are no longer standing in isolation. They are connected by invisible threads of pride, blood, and memory. In this part of our journey, we look at the slow gathering storm of conflict. It is not a story of sudden explosions or chaotic noise, but a story of a long, tired pressure, of brothers who became rivals, and of a peace that slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to slip away like sand through a stone carver's fingers. The Maya world was a world of kings, and a king's glory was measured by his reflection in the eyes of his peers. For centuries, the great kingdoms of the lowlands existed in a delicate state of balance. Tikal, the great city of the forest, and Calakmul, the hidden power of the north, were like two celestial bodies orbiting one another. They were the superpowers of their age, and every smaller city, every hamlet and village, was caught in the gravitational pull of their rivalry. Imagine the maps of the kings not drawn on paper, but etched into the minds of messengers who ran along the white limestone roads. The Sakbib, carrying whispers of alliances and the heavy news of betrayal, warfare. In this ancient time was a slow and ritualized dance. It was not intended to destroy the world, but to affirm the order of it. When two cities disagreed over a boundary, or when a young king sought to prove his divinity, the conflict was conducted with a sense of solemnity. It was a war of the elites. Imagine the warriors as they prepared for the march. They did not wear armor of metal, but suits of quilted cotton, soaked in salt water to make them tough and resilient. They carried shields made of wood and leather, decorated with the feathers of the macaw and the fur of the jaguar. Their weapons were beautiful and terrible, spears tipped with translucent obsidian, and clubs embedded with teeth of volcanic glass that shimmered like dark water in the sun as you drift. Visualize these armies moving through the jungle. They move quietly, their feet barely disturbing the fallen leaves. There is no heavy machinery, no thunder of hooves. There is only the soft, rhythmic clinking of jade jewelry and the low, steady breathing of men who believe that their cause is sanctioned by the stars. The goal of these battles was rarely the total destruction of a city. The Maya valued the labor of the people and the sanctity of the temples too much to burn them to the ground. Instead, they sought captives. To capture a rival lord, to take a high-ranking priest or a noble warrior, was to take a piece of the enemy's soul. It was a way of demonstrating that your gods were stronger, your rituals more potent, and your lineage more ancient in the great plazas. The return of a victorious army was a sight of somber grandeur. The captives were led through the city, their fine jewelry removed, their hair unbound as a sign of humility. They were not treated with random cruelty, but with a calculated, ritualized importance. They were the precious offerings. In the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the soft, mournful songs of the prisoners waiting in the cool stone chambers beneath the palace. They knew their fate was to be the fuel for the next cycle of the world. Their sacrifice was seen as a bridge, a way to feed the earth and ensure that the sun would continue its journey. But as the generations passed, the nature of this ritual dance began to change. The pressure we felt in our last chapter, the thinning soil, the empty reservoirs, the growing hunger, began to seep into the politics of the kings. The wars grew longer. The gaps between the periods of peace grew shorter. What was once a ritual for the elites became a burden for the many. The War of the Brothers began to consume more and more of the civilization's energy. Tikal and Calakmul, like two aging giants, became locked in a centuries-long struggle for dominance, pulling every smaller city into their orbit. Imagine a small city, nestled in a fertile valley, that once spent its time carving monuments to the passage of time. Now, its people are called away from the fields, not to build temples, but to build walls. You can see the shift in the architecture itself. The open, inviting plazas are being closed off. Massive defensive earthworks are being dug into the limestone. Palisades of sharpened logs are rising where fruit trees once grew. The beauty of the city is being hidden behind a mask of fear. This is a slow, spiritual exhaustion. When a society begins to look inward, when it begins to see its neighbors not as partners in trade, but as threats to its survival, the soul of that society begins to wither. The alliances were like the vines of the jungle, intricate, twisting, and often choking. A king might marry his daughter to the lord of a distant city to secure a border, only to find that his new son-in-law has secretly pledged his loyalty to a rival. The betrayals were recorded in the glyphs, though often hidden in poetic language. The star was seen over the city. The inscriptions might say, a cryptic way of describing an attack. The flint and the shield were brought down. These phrases were spoken with a heavy, calm resignation. It was as if the Maya knew that the conflict was a part of the great cycle, but it was a cycle that was spinning faster and faster, out of control. Consider the cost of this constant tension. Every hour spent on a defensive wall was an hour lost to the maintenance of the irrigation canals. Every farmer who was called to carry a spear was a farmer who could not tend to the corn. The environmental stress and the political stress fed upon one another. A drought made resources scarce. Scarcity led to conflict. Conflict destroyed the infrastructure needed to survive the drought. It was a circle of shadow, a slow-motion collapse of the harmony that had sustained the Maya for 1,000 years. As you rest, let the weight of this history settle softly upon you. It is a story of human ambition and the fragility of peace. But even in the midst of this conflict, there was beauty. The kings still commissioned great works of art to celebrate their victories. The poets still wrote of the sky serpents and the jeweled lords. They tried to maintain the dignity of their world, even as the foundations were shaking. They believed that as long as they performed the rituals correctly, as long as they honored the ancestors, the world would remain upright. But the wars between brothers were exhausting the spirit of the people. The commoners, who watched the kings and nobles engage in their high-stakes games of jade and blood, began to feel the weight of a system that offered less and less protection in exchange for more and more labor. The trust, that invisible, golden thread that holds a civilization together, was beginning to fray. You can imagine the farmer, looking up from his dry field, at the newly built wall, wondering if the stone and wood could really keep out the hunger, or if they were only building a grander cage. In the quiet, cool air of the night, the sound of the drum fades. The warriors have returned to their homes. The kings are sleeping in their painted chambers, dreaming of glory and the return of the rain. The jungle, as always, is waiting. It does not care about the boundaries of kings or the names of the victors. It only knows the slow growth of the moss and the steady drip of water in the caves. The conflict, so urgent and all-consuming to the people of the time, is now just a series of carvings on a stone that is slowly being reclaimed by the green. The wars were not the end of the Maya, but they were the fatigue that made the end possible. They were the fever that weakened the body before the long sleep. As you drift further into your own sleep, feel that fatigue leaving your own limbs. The conflicts of your own world, the stresses of your own day, are like the ancient wars of the kings. They are passing into the shadow. They are becoming part of the long, slow history of the earth. The stars are indifferent to the flint and the shield. The moon rises over the empty ball courts and the silent walls, casting a silver piece over the landscape of the past. You are here, in the present, safe and still. The story of the Maya is a mirror, reflecting the complexity of being human, the beauty of our creations, and the inevitability of our rest. Breathe in the cool night air. Let the sounds of the ancient drums dissolve into the rhythm of your own heart. You are drifting, you are dreaming, and you are falling into the deep, quiet embrace of time. The night has settled into a deep, velvety stillness. The air is thick and sweet, with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the damp, cool breath of the limestone earth. As you lie here, perfectly still, imagine the jungle as it was at the very peak of its human journey. We have seen the glory of the temples and the intensity of the wars, but now, we must look closer at the ground, at the soil, the trees, and the millions of tiny footsteps that once wore paths through the green. We are exploring the weight of power, not the power of kings to command, but the power of a population to transform the very world that sustains it. In the late 8th century, the Maya lowlands were not a wilderness. They were a sprawling, interconnected garden. Imagine the sheer scale of life. It is estimated that in some regions, the population density rivaled that of modern-day agricultural hubs. In the great city-states, tens of thousands lived within the stone cores. But in the surrounding countryside, millions more lived in small clusters of thatched roof houses. Every hillside was terraced. Every swamp was drained and turned into a raised field. Every forest clearing was a farm. You are standing in a world where the wild has been entirely tamed, where every square inch of the landscape is working to feed the hunger of a civilization. As you drift, think about the rhythm of the Maya farmer. His life was governed by the corn. To the Maya, maize was not just a crop. It was the substance of their ancestors. But to grow enough maize for millions of people in a tropical environment is a feat of immense and exhausting labor. The soil in the lowlands is naturally thin, a fragile layer of nutrients sitting atop the hard limestone. For centuries, the Maya had managed this by allowing the land to rest. They would clear a patch of forest, plant for a few years, and then let the jungle reclaim it for a decade or more, allowing the soil to replenish its strength. But as the population grew, the resting time grew shorter. The pressure to produce more and more food became a constant, rhythmic demand. The land was forced to work harder, year after year, without the quiet of the fallow seasons. Imagine the soil beginning to lose its richness. The stalks of corn, once tall and vibrant, become slightly smaller. The kernels are not as full. The green of the leaves is a little paler. This is the slow, quiet beginning of resource depletion. It is not a sudden catastrophe, but a gradual thinning of the life force of the earth. The Maya were brilliant engineers of the environment. They built raised fields in the bojos, the seasonal wetlands. They would dig canals and pile the nutrient-rich muck from the bottom into high platforms, creating incredibly fertile plots that could produce multiple harvests a year. You can almost hear the soft splash of the farmers' wooden shovels as they move through the canals in their dugout canoes. But even these sophisticated systems had their limits. The water in the canals needed to move. It needed to be managed. When the climate began to shift, as we saw in our earlier chapters, these systems became harder to maintain. The balance between the man-made and the natural was beginning to tilt. Consider the trees. The forest was the Maya's great storehouse. It provided the mahogany for their canoes, the cedar for their temple lintels, the fruit of the ramon nut for times of famine, and the sap of the sapodilla for their chewing gum. But above all, the forest provided fuel. As we have explored, the great cities were monuments of lime, to create the brilliant, white plaster that covered every pyramid, every palace, and every plaza. The Maya had to burn limestone at immense temperatures. Imagine the smoke from the kilns rising across the horizon like a permanent mist. For every major building project, a vast circle of forest was stripped bare. The heat from the kilns was insatiable. As the forests receded, the landscape changed. Without the roots of the trees to hold the soil, the tropical rains, when they did, comb-washed the earth, down the hillsides, and into the reservoirs, filling the precious water systems with silt. Without the canopy to shade the ground, the sun baked the earth into a hard, cracked crust. The temperature of the local world began to rise, not because of some distant shift, but because the shade was gone. The weight of power is also the weight of hierarchy. The kings and the nobles lived lives of exquisite beauty and ritual. They wore the finest jade, the brightest feathers, and the most delicate cotton. But this lifestyle was supported by the labor of the commoners. As the environment grew more stressed, the demands on the farmers did not decrease. They increased. The kings needed more rituals to appease the gods. They needed larger temples to demonstrate their power. They needed more tribute to fund their wars. You can imagine the quiet conversation in a small household at the edge of the forest. The father comes home from the fields, his hands stained with the red earth, his shoulders weary. He looks at the small pile of corn he has harvested. The king's portion must be set aside first. There is less for the children. There is less for the elders. The trust that once held the society together, the belief that the king's rituals ensured the bounty of the earth is beginning to feel like a heavy, cold chain. The overpopulation was a triumph of Maya society, but it was also its greatest vulnerability. In a world of millions, there is no margin for error. A single bad harvest is a concern. 3 bad harvests in a row is a disaster. There was no elsewhere to go. Every valley was already full. Every neighboring kingdom was facing the same pressures. The world had become a closed system, a stone vessel filled to the brim, and the heat was rising. Archaeologists, looking back through time, have found the evidence of this stress in the bones of the people themselves. In the later years of the Great Collapse, the skeletons of the commoners show signs of anemia and malnutrition. They are shorter than their ancestors. Their teeth show the marks of childhood hunger. Even the elite were not immune, as the variety of their diet began to shrink. The abundance of the early centuries was fading into a long, gray era of scarcity. As you sink into the cool, dark waters of sleep, reflect on the fragility of this balance. The Maya did not fail because they were unwise. They were perhaps too successful. They built a world so grand and so populous that it required the environment to be perfect every single year. They were like a magnificent tree that had grown so tall and so heavy with fruit that its roots could no longer hold it in a storm. But the forest is a place of cycles. Even as the soil grew tired and the trees disappeared, the seeds of the next world were already waiting. The collapse was not the end of the people, but the end of a particular way of being. It was the moment the weight became too much to carry, and the people began to set their burdens down. The night is quiet now. The sound of the kilns has long since faded. The smoke has cleared, and the stars are shining through the branches of the trees that have finally grown back. You are resting in the stillness that followed the storm. The earth is no longer under pressure. The soil is rich and deep once more. You are safe in the arms of a world that has learned how to breathe again. Feel the lightness of your own body. There is no weight for you to carry tonight. No fields to tend, no temples to build, no kings to serve. There is only the soft, rhythmic cycle of your own breath, as steady and inevitable as the turning of the earth. Sleep now, drifting away from the crowded cities of the past, moving into the wide open spaces of a long and peaceful rest. The night air is still, so perfectly still that you can almost hear the soft, rhythmic settling of the stones in the great temples. As you drift further into this story, imagine the silence that begins to fill the hearts of the people. It is a quiet, heavy silence. It is the sound of a world that is losing its anchor. For centuries, the Maya civilization was held together by a golden thread of faith, a profound belief that the king was the axis of the universe, and that his rituals were the only thing keeping the sun in the sky and the rain in the clouds. But now, in the late 9th century, that thread is beginning to fray. It is not snapping all at once. It is thinning, strand by strand, in the quiet corners of the mind. Visualize the great plaza at dawn. The mist is rising from the forest floor, clinging to the base of the pyramids like a cold, gray shroud. On the summit of the tallest temple, the king is preparing for a ritual. He is dressed in his most magnificent attire, the jade pectorals, the quetzal feather headdress, the obsidian blades. He moves with a slow, practiced grace, performing the same gestures his father performed, and his grandfather before him. He is the Holy Lord, the conduit for the divine. But as he speaks the ancient prayers, he can feel the emptiness of the air. The words feel heavy in his mouth. He looks out over his city, and he sees the dry reservoirs, the dusty fields, and the tired eyes of his people. The people are there, gathered in the plaza below, but they are quieter than they used to be. They watch the king, not with the fervent hope of the past, but with a growing, hollow disappointment. They have seen the blood offered. They have seen the incense burned. They have seen the captives taken and the ceremonies performed with perfect precision. And yet, the rain does not come. The crops continue to fail. The wars continue to bleed. The villages dry. A slow, cold realization is beginning to take root in the soil of their souls. Perhaps the king is not a god. Perhaps the rituals are just empty motions. Perhaps the gods have stopped listening altogether. Imagine the psychological weight of this realization. To the Maya, a king who could not bring the rain was not just a poor leader. He was a broken instrument. His very existence was meant to ensure the fertility of the earth. If the earth was barren, then the king Shula, his divine essence, must have faded. You can feel the emotional distance growing between the palace and the thatched roof houses. It is a distance that cannot be bridged by taller temples or more elaborate carvings. In fact, the more the king tries to prove his power through grand construction, the more he alienates the people who must carry the stones. Faith does not vanish in a single day of fire. It fades like the color of a painted wall exposed to 1,000 years of sun. It is a slow bleaching of the spirit. In the villages, the small household altars are still tended. The mothers still offer bits of copal and small bowls of maize to the local spirits of the spring and the field. But the great state's religion, the grand narrative of the divine kings, is becoming a burden. The people are tired. They are tired of the demands for labor. They are tired of the promises that are never kept. They are tired of the silence of the sky. There is a profound melancholy in this part of the story. It is the feeling of a long-term relationship that has lost its trust. The king continues to build, to dance, and to bleed, because that is all he knows how to do. He is trapped in his own divinity. He repeats the rituals out of habit, out of fear, and out of a desperate need to maintain the order that is crumbling around him. But the magic is gone. The connection is severed. The rituals, once vibrant and pulsing with life, have become hollow echoes. As you drift deeper into sleep, think about the quiet doubt that grows over generations. A child born into this time has never seen a truly bountiful harvest. They have never known a time when the king's word felt like a guarantee of safety. To them, the Great Pyramids are not mountains of hope, but mountains of stone that require endless work to maintain. The myths of the hero twins and the maize god begin to feel like stories for a different world. A world where the gods actually cared about the hunger of men. The collapse of ideological authority is a gentle, almost invisible process. It happens in the whispered conversations behind the granaries. It happens in the way a farmer looks at the sky and then looks at the ground, ignoring the temple altogether. It happens when a priest forgets a line of a prayer and no one bothers to correct him. The society is becoming spiritually hollowed out. The structures of power are still there. The palaces are still grand. The courts are still active, but the spirit that animated them has departed. In the quiet of the night, the jungle seems to notice this shift. The trees lean closer to the abandoned fields. The vines begin to test the strength of the temple stairs. The world of nature is indifferent to the loss of human faith. It is simply waiting for its turn to reclaim the space. The Maya world was built on a foundation of belief, and as that foundation dissolves, the stones themselves begin to feel less permanent. You are resting now, safe from the weight of these ancient disappointments. The loss of faith is a story of the past, a slow fading of light that allows you to sink into the cooling shadows of the present. There is no pressure on you to believe, no ritual you must perform, no king you must serve. There is only the soft, rhythmic breathing of the night. The disillusionment of the Maya is a part of the long history of the human heart, a reminder that all things, even the most sacred, have their season. Feel the peace of the silence. It is not a hollow silence, but a restful one. The kings have finished their dances. The priests have set down their scrolls. The people have turned their backs on the empty promises of the pyramids. They are beginning to look elsewhere toward the coasts, toward the mountains, toward a life that does not require the heavy burden of a divine king. They are moving toward a new kind of freedom, a quiet exit from a story that no longer makes sense. The sky is dark and vast, filled with stars that do not care if they are watched or named. The Maya astronomers have gone home. The calendars are no longer being carved into the stone. The long count is still running, but there is no one left to read its pulse. You are drifting on that same current of time, moving away from the exhaustion of the old world and into the restorative embrace of sleep. The story is not over, but it is changing. The weight is lifting. The faith is fading into the mist, leaving behind a clear, quiet space for rest. Let the images of the red temples and the jade-clad lords dissolve into the soft, gray light of the moon. You are safe. You are still. You are falling into a deep and dreamless peace, where the only ritual is the slow, steady beat of your own heart. The night air has grown cooler now, a soft and silver-touched wind that moves through the high branches of the mahogany trees with a sound like a long, slow sigh. As you sink into the deep comfort of your rest, imagine a city that is beginning to breathe in a different way. It is the 9th century, in the heart of the Peton jungle, and the great pulse of human life, the shouting of the markets, the chanting of the priests, the rhythmic strike of the stonemasons is starting to fade. It is not a sudden silence. It is a slow, gradual receding of the tide. Imagine yourself walking through the streets of a great Maya capital, not during a time of war or fire, but during a time of quiet departure. The collapse of the Maya was not an explosion. It was a fading light. It was a choice made by thousands of families over many decades to simply walk away. You can see it in the architecture of the later years, in the great plazas, where once the white plaster was kept perfectly clean and smooth. A thin layer of dust has begun to settle. A single blade of grass pushes through a crack in the stone. No one pulls it out. A small vine, green and delicate, begins to curl around the base of a royal stele. No one cuts it back. The city is not being destroyed. It is being forgotten, one day at a time. One household at a time, as you drift. Visualize the residential compounds that spread out from the stone core. In one house, a potter has left behind a half-finished vessel, the clay now dry and brittle. In another, a weaving loom stands silent, the cotton threads frayed and dusty. There was no panic here. There are no bodies in the streets, no signs of a sudden, desperate flight. Instead, there is the feeling of a long, tired sigh. A family gathers their most precious belongings, their jade beads, their obsidian knives, their sacred seed sand. They begin to walk toward the horizon. They are looking for water. They are looking for a land that has not been exhausted by the demands of kings. They are looking for a place where the gods might still be listening. The departure happens in waves. First, the outskirts begin to empty. The farmers move further away, seeking the margins of the swamps or the hidden valleys of the highlands. Then, the artisans and the traders, finding no one to buy their goods or use their skills, follow the paths out of the city. Finally, the palaces themselves grow quiet. The servants leave. The scribes set down their brushes. The royal family, once the center of the universe, finds themselves alone in a mountain of stone that no longer serves a purpose. The king may stay for a time, performing the ancient rituals in an empty plaza, his voice echoing off the silent temples, until he too realizes that the story is ended. There is a profound, hypnotic peace in this image of the world returning to itself. The jungle, which had been pushed back for 1,000 years, begins to move back in with a slow and steady grace. It does not rush. It moves with the patience of the earth. First come the fast-growing weeds and the soft mosses, turning the red and white stone into a mottled green. Then come the saplings of the ceiba and the cedar, their roots finding the tiny cracks in the plaster, prying the stones apart with the strength of time. The great roof combs of the temples, which once held the images of gods and ancestors, are slowly draped in a curtain of emerald vines. Imagine the sound of the city as it empties. The constant hum of human activity is replaced by the sounds of the wild. The macaws return to the plazas, their bright feathers a flash of color against the fading paint. The jaguars, once the symbols of royal power, now walk the corridors of the palaces as the true masters of the shade. The reservoirs, once carefully scrubbed and managed, turn into dark. Still ponds where the frogs sing their nightly chorus, and the dragonflies dance over the surface of the stagnant water. The water lilies continue to bloom, but there is no one left to admire their purity. The trade routes, those invisible veins that connected the mountains to the sea, begin to wither. The great canoes no longer move along the rivers laden with salt and obsidian. The mountain passes grow silent. The world of the Maya, once a vast and interconnected web, is breaking down into smaller, isolated fragments. A village in the north may not know for years that the great city in the south has fallen silent. News travels slowly when the roads are overgrown. The maps of the mind are being rewritten, the great names of the kingdoms fading into the mist of legend. Archaeologists, digging through the layers of the past, find the traces of this quiet exit. They find hearths where the fire was allowed to go out and never relit. They find rooms that were carefully sealed with stones, as if the owners intended to return one day, but never did. There is a sense of closure in these places. It is the story of a civilization that simply reached its limit environmentally, socially, and spiritually and chose to let go. It is a story of profound humility. When the grand dream of the city no longer worked, the people returned to the simple reality of the soil and the rain. As you sink deeper into your bed, let the silence of the abandoned cities wrap around you. There is no tragedy in this silence. There is only rest. The stones are no longer being struck by chisels. The trees are no longer being felled by axes. The earth is finally being allowed to sleep, to heal, and to replenish the nutrients that were taken from it. The Maya did not disappear. They simply changed their shape. They traded the heavy, permanent stone for the light, living wood. They moved away from the burden of history and back into the rhythm of the seasons. Think of the great temple of the giant jaguar at Tikal, standing tall above the canopy. For centuries, it was a beacon of power. Now, it is a mountain of memory. The wind whistles through the chambers at its summit, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. The stars pass over it in their silent, eternal cycles, indifferent to the rise and fall of the kings who once watched them from these very stones. The long count continues to tick, but the dates are no longer being carved. The time is moving forward, but it is moving into a different era, quieter, more hidden time. Feel the stillness of the abandoned plaza in your own limbs. The weight of the day is like the weight of the ancient stones. It is being set down. You are leaving the noise and the pressure of your own world behind, just as the Maya families left their cities. You are walking a quiet path into the green, misty landscape of your dreams. There is nothing you need to build. There is nothing you need to defend. There is only the soft, rhythmic breathing of the night. The city is sleeping. The jungle is whispering. The stones are cool and covered in moss. You are safe in the knowledge that all things have their time, and that there is a deep, restorative beauty in the act of letting go. The collapse was not an end, but a transition, a return to the balance that had been lost. As you drift into the deepest part of your sleep, imagine the green leaves slowly closing over the past, leaving only the peace of the present moment. The light of the moon reflects off the dark water of the silent reservoirs. The shadows of the trees stretch across the empty courtyards. The world is turning, the stars are moving, and you are falling, falling into the soft, velvet embrace of the ancient jungle. The air is cool now, and the heavy weight of the stone cities has lifted from the land. As you drift further into the stillness of the night, imagine the jungle floor breathing a long, slow sigh of relief. The great temples are still there, hidden behind a veil of emerald green, but they are no longer the centers of the world. They have become part of the landscape, mountains of memory that the trees have claimed for their own. In this part of our journey, we find that the story of the Maya did not end with the silence of the plazas. It simply changed its tone. It became a softer song, a whisper moving through the leaves, a story of endurance, adaptation, and the quiet beauty of a people who learned to live in harmony with the rhythm of the earth. Once more, the collapse was not a disappearance. It was a transformation. Imagine the families who moved away from the crowded, parched centers of the South. They did not vanish into the mist. They moved with the grace of water, finding the path of least resistance. Some traveled north to the flat plains of the Yucatan, where the cenotes still offered cool, deep water, and the sea breezes brought relief from the heat. Others moved toward the coast, where the turquoise waters of the Caribbean provided a bounty of salt and fish. They traded their heavy stone palaces for light, airy houses of wood and thatch homes that could breathe with the jungle. Homes that did not require the sacrifice of a forest to build. As you rest, visualize these smaller communities. They are vibrant, but quiet. The massive ceremonies of the divine kings have been replaced by the intimate rituals of the village. The farmers still plant their maize, but they no longer do so to feed the insatiable hunger of a city. They plant for their families, for their neighbors, and for the spirits of the land. The relationship with the earth has become personal again. The farmer kneels in the soil, and he does not see a resource to be exploited, but a relative to be honored. He speaks to the corn as if it were his own child, and the corn, in the renewed richness of the soil, begins to grow tall and strong once more. The knowledge of the ancestors did not die. It was carried in the hearts and the voices of the people. The grand inscriptions on the stele may have become difficult to read, as the moss covered the glyphs, but the stories they told lived on in the oral traditions. Around the hearth fires at night, under the same stars that the ancient astronomers watched, the elders told the stories of the hero twins and the creation of the world. They spoke of the time when the kings were like gods, not with bitterness, but with a calm, reflective wisdom. They understood that all things move in cycles: the moon, the seasons, and the civilizations of men. They were living in the quiet part of the cycle, the time of rest and regrowth. In the northern lowlands, cities like Chichen Itza and later Miapan began to rise, but they were different from the giants of the past. They were more practical, more focused on trade and connection. The long count calendar, with its vast, terrifying spans of time, gave way to the short count, a more manageable cycle of 13K a time. The people were simplifying. They were letting go of the heavy burdens of the past and embracing a world that was more flexible, more resilient. They became masters of the sea, navigating the coastline in great dugout canoes, trading honey, salt, and feathers from one end of the peninsula to the other. The jungle, too, was healing. Without the constant demand for lime and fuel, the forests returned in all their ancient glory. The mahogany and the cedar grew tall over the ruins of the old palaces, their roots holding the stones in a gentle, protective embrace. The birds and the jaguars multiplied. The water in the reservoirs cleared as the silt settled and the plants returned to filter the flow. The land was no longer a machine for production. It was a living sanctuary. The Maya, who remained in the deep forest, lived in a world of abundance, their lives synchronized with the fruiting of the trees and the migration of the birds. Imagine the quiet continuity of life over the centuries that followed. A hunter moves through the forest, passing a hill that he knows is actually a temple. He does not stop to excavate it. He offers a small prayer of respect and moves on. A weaver sits in the shade of a palm tree, her fingers moving with the same rhythmic grace as her ancestors 1,000 years before. The patterns she weaves, the diamonds, representing the earth, the zigzags, representing the serpentine, the same patterns found on the ancient pottery. The colors are the same. The spirit is the same. The civilization had collapsed in the eyes of history, but in the eyes of the people, they were simply continuing to be who they had always been. This period of history is often overlooked, but it is perhaps the most beautiful. It is the story of survival without ego. It is the story of how a culture can lose its monuments, but keep its soul. The Maya did not need the pyramids to be Maya. They needed the corn, they needed the stars, and they needed each other. As the centuries turned, they faced new challenges, new people arriving from the north, and eventually, the arrival of strangers from across the sea. But the resilience they had learned during the great transition of the 9th century served them well. They knew how to adapt. They knew how to endure. As you sink deeper into your sleep, feel the reassurance of this endurance. The world does not end when the great structures fall. Life finds a way to move around the obstacles, like a river flowing around a stone. The echoes in the jungle are not ghostly or sad. They are the sounds of life continuing in a new key. The rustle of the leaves, the call of the night bird, the soft murmur of a family at rest. These are the true sounds of the Maya world. The stones are silent, but the people are still here. They are in the mountains of Guatemala, the forests of the Petén, and the villages of the Yucatan. They still speak the ancient languages. They still pray to the rain god Chalk. They still watch the movements of the sun and the moon. The collapse was merely a long, deep breath before a new beginning. It was the moment the Maya chose to walk softly upon the earth again. You are resting in that same softness now. The pressure of achievement, the weight of building, the noise of competition, all of it has faded away, leaving only the quiet pulse of existence. You are like the forest, reclaiming the stone, growing slowly and peacefully over the worries of the day. You are safe in the continuity of time. The story of the Maya is a reminder that even when things seem to fall apart, they are often just falling into a better, more natural order. Let the image of the green jungle, dotted with small, peaceful villages, be the last thing you see before you drift away. The fires are low. The children are sleeping. The ancestors are watching from the silver path of the Milky Way. The world is at peace, and so are you. The echoes are fading into the stillness, and the night is holding you in its ancient, steady arms. The air is now a perfect stillness, a cool and velvet dark that holds the world in a silent embrace. As you lie here, floating on the very edge of sleep, imagine the light of the Maya world fading into a soft, golden glow. It is the time of the last light, the moment when the sun has dipped far below the horizon, and only a faint, beautiful violet remains in the sky. We are standing together at the end of our journey, looking back one last time at the great, green ocean of the jungle, and seeing it not as a place of mystery or collapse, but as a place of profound and eternal peace. The story has been told, the stones have spoken, and now, it is time for the words to dissolve. Imagine the great cities we visited, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, as they appear now, in the deepest part of the night. They are not ruins. They are resting. The temples are like giant, sleeping animals, their gray stone flanks covered in the soft fur of the moss. The plazas are empty of people, but they are full of the moonlight. The silence that once seemed like a mystery now feels like a gift. It is the silence of a long, well-deserved sleep as you drift. Think of the millions of lives that once pulsed through this land. Think of them not as people of the past, but as a gentle energy that is returned to the earth. The kings, the farmers, the astronomers, the children, they are all part of the soil now. They are in the roots of the trees. They are in the scent of the jasmine. They are in the cool water of the sea. They have become the landscape itself. Their ambitions, their fears, and their triumphs have all been absorbed by the patience of the forest. There is no judgment in the jungle. The trees do not care why the cities were left behind. They only know how to grow, how to breathe, and how to hold the earth together. Nature is the great keeper of stories. It does not write them in books or carve them in stone. It breathes them. Every leaf that falls is a page turned. Every rain that washes over the limestone is a memory being cleaned. The Maya world is not gone. It is simply being held in a different way. It is being held by the roots of the mahogany. It is being held by the flight of the macaw. It is being held by the slow, rhythmic turning of the seasons. You can feel that same rhythm in your own body now, a slow, steady pulse that matches the heartbeat of the world. There is a sense of peaceful release in this moment. The heavy burdens of time, the complicated gears of the calendars, and the weight of the stone mountains are all being set down. You are letting go of the need to understand. You are letting go of the need to remember. You are simply being. The history of the Maya is like a long, beautiful dream that is slowly fading as you wake into a deeper rest. The colors are softening. The sounds are growing distant. The red of the temples is turning to shadow. The green of the leaves is turning to black dot. Imagine the Milky Way, the great white road, stretching across the sky above you. To the Maya, this was the path of souls, a river of light that led to the heart of the heavens. See yourself drifting along that river. It is a slow, effortless movement. There is no current to fight, no destination to reach. You are just floating in the vast, silver peace of the cosmos. The stars are like tiny, distant fires, keeping watch over the sleeping earth. They have seen everything, the rise of the first kings, and the departure of the last families, and they remain unchanged. Their light is a constant, a reassurance that the universe is in its proper order. The world is very quiet now. The wind has died down to a whisper. The insects have found their rhythm, a steady, hypnotic vibration that pulls you deeper and deeper into the stillness. The stories of the wars and the droughts, the power and the faith, are all receding into the background. They are becoming like the soft gray mist that clings to the forest floor at dawn, beautiful, ethereal, and ready to vanish when the light returns. But for now, there is only the dark. There is only the cool, restorative dark. The time is continuing, but it is no longer being counted. There are no K-tones to mark, no bucktones to fear. There is only this breath, and then the next. The Maya knew that at the end of every cycle, there was a moment of absolute stillness before the new world began. You are in that stillness now. You are in the gap between the breaths of the universe. It is a safe place. It is a warm place. It is a place where you can finally let the weight of your own life dissolve into the history of the earth. Everything is falling away. The names of the kings are fading. The shapes of the pyramids are blurring. The scent of the copal smoke is vanishing into the night air. You are left with nothing but the feeling of the surface beneath you and the air around you. You are part of the long, quiet history of the jungle. You are part of the stones. You are part of the stars. You are drifting into a place where there are no more stories, only the deep, wordless peace of the ancient world. The last light of the Maya is a gentle glow, like the embers of a fire that has kept you warm all night. It is not going out. It is just becoming part of the darkness. It is sinking into the earth, joining the ancestors, joining the roots, joining the silence. You are following it down. You are moving into the cool, dark water of the deepest sleep. There is no more need for words. There is no more need for light. The jungle is cradling you. The night is holding you. The stars are watching you. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. Everything is at rest. The stones are sleeping. The trees are breathing. The world is turning. You are safe. You are drifting. You are letting go. You are falling. You are peace.